For 20 years, I believed my two children had thrown me away like something gone bad in the back of the refrigerator. I was 63 years old the afternoon I finally learned the truth. And before I tell you the rest, I need you to understand something. The truth was worse than being thrown away. Because the person who did this to me, to all of us, had been sitting across my kitchen table every single Sunday for 20 years, holding my hand, pouring my coffee, telling me she was the only family I had left. I trusted her with everything. My mail, my money, my grief. And on a gray Wednesday in October, standing alone in her spare bedroom while she was out at the pharmacy, I opened a cardboard box I was never meant to see. Inside it was 20 years of my own life that someone had been stealing from me one birthday at a time. My name is Joyce Harmon. I live in Gary, Indiana, in a one-bedroom apartment with a window that looks out on a street where nothing much ever happens. I am the mother of 2 children I raised by myself. I am the grandmother of 3 babies I was never once allowed to hold. At least that is what I believed. For 20 years, that belief sat on my chest like a stone I couldn't lift and couldn't put down. To understand how a mother can spend 2 decades hating her own children and be wrong about every single second of it, you have to see it the way I saw it. You have to walk into the lie the way I walked into it, trusting, grateful, and completely certain I already knew the whole story. So you have to believe it first, just the way I did. Let me start at the beginning. Let me start with the coffee. Every morning of my life, I make a pot of coffee, and I carry a cup to the window, and I sit and I look at the pictures on my wall. There are a lot of pictures. Renee in her yellow Easter dress, 6 years old, front teeth, missing, squinting into the sun. Darius in his little glasses holding up a library book like it was a trophy. The 4 of us at the lake one summer when we had almost no money at all. Samuel and me and the 2 kids, all of us sunburned and grinning on a blanket at the edge of Lake Michigan, back when a bag of charcoal and a package of hot dogs felt like a celebration. Samuel was my husband. He passed 20 years ago now, a stroke sudden, no warning, no goodbye. One Tuesday he was tightening the hinge on the screen door, and by Thursday I was a widow with 2 grown children and a mortgage I had no idea how I was going to pay. But I want to take you back further than that. Because before there was any silence between me and my kids, there were years, good years, and I need you to see them. I need you to know who we were so you understand what was taken. When Renee and Darius were small, I worked 2 jobs. I was a cashier at the Kroger on Broadway during the day, and 3 nights a week I cleaned offices downtown after everybody else had gone home. My hands cracked in the winter from the cleaning solution. I kept a jar of Vaseline by the bed, and I'd rub it into my knuckles at midnight while my babies slept in the next room. I did it so they could have things I never had. Renee wanted to take piano. I found the money for piano. Darius struggled in math, and a tutor was $100 a week I did not have, so I picked up a 4th thing selling makeup out of a case door to door on Saturdays, and I paid for the tutor. Darius loved one particular book so much that the cover fell off it. He'd climb into my lap every night, 10 years old and getting too big for laps, and say, "Read it again, Mama." And I'd read it again. Every night. I could recite that book in my sleep. That was us. That was the family I built with these 2 hands. And when Samuel died, and the 2 of them grown now, Renee was 24. Darius, 21, when they came home for the funeral and fell apart in my arms like children again, I held them both and I made them a promise. I said, "As long as I'm still breathing, you will always have a mother." I meant it more than I have ever meant anything. Now here is where I have to tell you about the 20 years of quiet. Because somewhere in the months after we buried their father, my children stopped calling me back. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you about losing people who are still alive. It happens the way it gets dark, so gradual you can't name the moment. A missed call here. A voicemail that never got returned. Renee moved to the suburbs with a man named Gregory and built a beautiful life. And the beautiful life did not seem to have a door in it that led to me. Darius took an engineering job 3 states away, married a woman named Michelle. I met exactly once, and then nothing. A wall of nothing. I did what any mother does. I refused to believe it. So I kept reaching. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day that came and went without a card, I would go out and buy them something anyway. A cashmere shawl for Renee, $180, soft as a cloud. I could picture it around her shoulders. A good pen for Darius when I heard he'd made manager $220 engraved with his initials because I wanted him to sign important papers and think of his mother. A bicycle $400 for a grandson I had never met because I found out through a cousin on Facebook that I had a grandson at all. I wrapped every gift like it mattered. I wrote long cards. I mailed them off, and I waited. I never once heard back. Not a thank you, not a note to say the box arrived, not one word for 20 years. There were 3 grandchildren out there who did not know my face. Imani, a girl 16 now, a boy, Jaden 12, and the baby Kayla 9 years old, whose name I only knew because I'd read it under a photograph I wasn't tagged in. 3 children growing up believing their grandmother simply wasn't around, believing I was sure that I hadn't wanted them. And I'll be honest with you, the way I can only be honest now. Somewhere in those 20 years, the hurt in me curdled into something harder. I stopped saying I miss them and started saying, how could they? I looked at those pictures on my wall every morning and I asked myself what I had done, what terrible thing I must have done to make my own babies erase me. There was only one person in the whole world who sat with me in that. Only one person who never left. My sister, Loretta. Loretta is 5 years younger than me. She came to my apartment every Sunday without fail for 20 years. She'd let herself in with her own key, and she'd start cooking before she even took her coat off. Smothered chicken greens, cornbread, the food our mother used to make. She'd sit across from me at that little kitchen table, and she'd pour the coffee, and she'd take my hand, and she would say the words I needed to hear. You did everything for those 2, she'd tell me. Everything. And they left you sitting here alone. It's a sin, Joyce. It's a shame before God. Her eyes would fill up. But you've still got me. You will always have me. I'm not going anywhere. I want you to understand what she was to me. When you have been abandoned by the 2 people you carried in your body, and one person on this earth keeps showing up every Sunday, rain or shine, for 20 years, that person becomes your whole world. Loretta was my witness. She was the only one who knew what I'd lost. I would have given her anything. In a way, I already had. I just didn't know it yet. Now I'm going to tell you some small things, little details from those years. At the time, not one of them meant a thing to me. They were just Loretta being Loretta, helpful, involved, looking after her big sister. It's only now, looking back, that I can see them for what they were. So I'm going to lay them down for you the way I found them, and I'll trust you to remember them better than I did. The first thing was the mail. After Samuel died, I fell apart in a way I'm not proud of. For the better part of a year, I could barely get out of bed. Bills piled up. And Loretta, God bless her, I thought Loretta stepped in and took it all off my hands. Don't you worry about a single envelope, she said. I've got it. She set up a post office box for me down at the branch on 5th, said it was safer than the apartment boxes, easier for her to manage. Box 338. She kept the key. Over the years, whenever there was mail, she'd bring it up to me on Sundays, already sorted. Half the time it was already opened. Saves you the trouble, she'd say, and I'd smile and thank her. The second thing was the phone. I'm not a computer person. Never wanted to be. And every time one of those younger folks at church would tell me I ought to get one of those smartphones, get on the Facebook, Loretta would wave her hand. Those things are full of scammers, Joyce. They'll steal you blind. You don't need it. So I kept my old flip phone on a number Loretta had helped me set up years back. I had my children's numbers saved in it, the ones Loretta had given me when they moved. Once in a while on a bad night, I'd work up my courage and dial one of them. It never rang through. Disconnected every time. See, I'd think they even changed their numbers so I couldn't reach them. It broke my heart fresh every time it happened. The third thing came the one time I tried to be brave. It was maybe 8 years ago. I said to Loretta over the coffee, I think I'm going to drive out to Renee's. Just show up. Just look my daughter in the face and ask her what I did. I have never seen my sister move so fast. She was around that table with her arms around me before I finished the sentence, and her eyes were already wet. Joyce, baby, no. You want that girl to slam a door in your face again? You want to stand on that porch and have her look at you like a stranger? I can't. I can't watch her break your heart one more time. I won't survive it, and neither will you. And she held me, and she rocked me, and by the time she let go, I had forgotten I ever wanted to be brave. She changed the subject to the church raffle, and I let her. The fourth thing I noticed, and then made myself unnotice, Loretta never had money. She'd tell me all the time how tight things were, how her Social Security barely covered her medicine. And yet, there was a new car in her driveway one spring, not brand new, but newer than anything I'd ever driven. There was a cruise to the Bahamas she took with her church group, and she came back with a tan and a little carved turtle she gave me for my shelf. How'd you manage all that, Retta? I asked her once. She got a funny look for just a second, then laughed it off. Oh, you know, A little something came in, inheritance from Cousin Pearl's side. I didn't have a Cousin Pearl on any side that I knew of, but I let it go. You don't count your sister's money, especially not the sister who never leaves. And the fifth thing. The fifth thing I actually held in my own 2 hands, and I still didn't understand it. I was at Loretta's one afternoon, and there on her side table was a padded envelope, and stamped across the front in red was "Return to Sender." The handwriting on the label caught my eye because it looked for just a moment like my own. I picked it up. Loretta took it out of my hand, smooth as anything, and set it in a drawer. "Somebody's always sending things to the wrong address," she said. "People can't read a zip code anymore." And she poured me more coffee, and I forgot about it before I'd finished the cup. There was one more strange thing, and this one had nothing to do with Loretta, or so I thought. A few years back, I got a letter from an insurance company about a supplemental policy, good coverage, better than anything I could have afforded, and it was already paid up in my name, and I could not for the life of me figure out where it had come from. I called the number, and a nice young man told me the premiums were current, and there was nothing for me to do. I decided it was some kind of clerical blessing, and I didn't ask again. I'll come back to that. It matters more than you could guess. Do you see them now? 5 small things. 6. Scattered across 20 years like coins dropped in the grass. At the time, not a single one of them was worth bending down to pick up. Then, on an ordinary afternoon last October, I went down to check my mailbox. The apartment box, the one Loretta didn't manage, the one that mostly held grocery flyers, and there among the coupons was a heavy cream-colored envelope. My name was on it in gold, not Loretta's writing, not a stranger's, a printer's gold. My hands were shaking before I even got it open. It was an invitation. Thick ivory cardstock gold lettering, the kind of thing you'd frame. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 45th birthday of Renee Coleman. An address in the suburbs I'd never seen. 6 o'clock this coming Saturday. Formal attire. There was no note, no "Dear Mama," no handwriting at all. Just the printed invitation, cold and perfect. But I sat down on the floor of my own hallway, right there among the coupons, and I cried like a girl. Because after 20 years of silence, my daughter had sent for me. I didn't sleep that week. I bought a dress wine-colored $200, nearly a quarter of my month, and I bought a gift, real silver, and I rehearsed what I would say into the bathroom mirror until the words stopped shaking. "Happy birthday, baby. You look beautiful. I've missed you every day. And Loretta." When I told Loretta, she went quiet in a way I'd never seen. Then she took a breath and she said, "Well, I'm coming with you." I told her she didn't have to. She took my hand across the table and she looked at me hard. "Joyce, I am not letting you walk into that lion's den by yourself. And listen to me." She dropped her voice. "People don't come looking for you after 20 years unless they smell money. You watch your purse in that house. You hear me? You watch your purse." I thought she was just protecting me. I thought that was love. That was the last afternoon of the old story, the one I believed. The house was enormous. The taxi let us out. I don't drive at night anymore, and Loretta and I stood on the sidewalk looking up at it. Warm light in every window, a valet taking cars music, and voices spilling out into the October dark. My daughter had done well for herself. She had done very well, and I had not been there for one single day of it. Inside, a woman in a black dress led us through a hallway hung with art back toward a great room full of people. 50 of them easy. Waiters with trays. Flowers on every surface. Everyone in silk and good jewelry, and me in my $200 dress holding a gift bag against my chest like a shield. I walked in braced for a trap. Loretta had put that in me, "Watch your purse, they smell money," and I carried it in like a stone in my shoe. I scanned that room, ready to catch the con, ready to be used. And then I saw Renee. She was across the room laughing with a group of women, and she was so beautiful it stopped my breath, 45 years old, my baby in a champagne-colored dress. She turned and she saw me, and her whole face changed. I braced for the cold smile. I braced for the polite, dismissive kiss on the air by my cheek. That's what I'd taught myself to expect over 20 years. That is not what happened. My daughter's face crumpled. Her hand came up over her mouth, and her eyes filled, and she came across that room fast, weaving through her own guests, and she did not stop until she had her arms around me so tight I could feel her shaking. "You came," she whispered into my hair. "You came. You actually came." I stood there stiff as a board, my mind scrambling to make it make sense. "She's performing," I told myself, "for her friends. It's an act." Loretta was right at my shoulder, and I heard her murmur just for me, "Look at the show she's putting on." But then Renee pulled back and held my face in both her hands, and there was nothing performed about what came out of her next. Her voice broke right down the middle. "Mama, why?" she said. "Why did you send everything back? Why did you tell us never to come home?" I opened my mouth, and no words came. Sent what back? Told you what I had spent 20 years begging to come home. But I couldn't get any of it out, and before I could, I heard Loretta's voice go bright and hard beside me. "All right now, this is a party, let's not do all this," steering, smoothing, moving us apart. And that is when I felt a small hand tugging at my sleeve. I looked down. A little girl was looking up at me, 9 years old hair in careful twists with beads on the ends, a gap where she'd lost a tooth. She had Renee's eyes exactly. She had my eyes. "Are you the grandma from the pictures?" she asked me. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. She tilted her head, studying me, and then she said the thing that would take my whole life and turn it inside out. She said it plainly, the way children say the truest things, with no idea what she was holding. "Are you the grandma who didn't want my letters?" The whole room seemed to go quiet, though I know it didn't. Letters. I had never received a letter, not one in 20 years. I had sent them into silence and gotten nothing back. And here was this baby telling me that I was the one who didn't want, as if I had refused her. As if something had come to me with her small hand on it and I had turned it away. "Sweetheart," I heard myself say, kneeling down, my knees cracking, "what letters I never—" But I never finished because Loretta had my elbow. She had my elbow and she was lifting me up, and her voice was loud now, loud enough to turn heads. "Okay, this was a mistake. Joyce, we're leaving, right now. I told you what this was." And she was moving me toward the hallway, and Renee was calling out behind us, "Mama, wait, please wait." And I was being carried away from my own daughter and my own grandbaby on the tide of my sister's certainty, too stunned to plant my feet. In the taxi, Loretta finally exhaled and patted my knee like I'd survived something. "I heard them, Joyce," she said, shaking her head, staring out at the passing lights. "In the kitchen, that son-in-law of hers, Gregory, going on about some beach house they want to buy. A family investment, he called it. And they need somebody to put money in." She turned and looked at me, all sorrow and love. 20 years of nothing, and then a fancy invitation the minute they've got a use for your savings. "I'm sorry, baby. I truly am. But I told you. Didn't I tell you it was always going to be about the money?" And I sat there in the dark of that cab, and I nodded because it was the story I knew. It was the story I had lived inside for 20 years, and my sister was handing it right back to me, warm and familiar, exactly the shape of the hole in my heart. I let her tuck me back into the lie. But somewhere underneath it, down in a place Loretta couldn't reach, a 9-year-old's voice had already started its quiet work. "Are you the grandma who didn't want my letters?" I didn't know it yet, but that little girl had just handed me the first thread. And in 3 days' time, I was going to start to pull it. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Loretta's explanation should have settled me. It was the same explanation I'd carried for 20 years, worn smooth as a river stone. They don't love me. They only want something. It was always going to end this way. It fit. It always fit. But it wouldn't lie down, because a 9-year-old had looked up at me with my own eyes and said a thing that did not fit. The grandma who didn't want my letters. I turned it over and over in the dark. Children lie, yes, but they lie about cookies and broken lamps. They don't invent a whole grief. They don't make up the specific wounded idea that a grandmother received something from them and turned it away. Where would a baby even get a thought like that? Somebody would have had to tell her. The third morning before the coffee, I got down on my hands and knees and I went through every drawer in my apartment. The junk drawer, the shoebox in the closet, the old biscuit tin where I keep important papers. I was looking for letters. Any letter from either of my children, from any of those grandbabies, from any time in 20 years. There was nothing. There had never been anything. That part was exactly as I'd always known it. But here is what stopped me kneeling there on my bedroom floor, with my knees aching and papers all around me. If they never wrote to me, then why did that child say I hadn't wanted her letters? You can't refuse a letter that was never sent. Somebody's story didn't add up. For 20 years I had assumed it was theirs. For the first time I wondered if it was mine. I didn't do anything about it that day. I just noticed. I sat down at my kitchen table with the cold coffee, and I let myself for the first time in 2 decades ask a dangerous question. What if I don't actually know what happened? It didn't feel like suspicion. I want to be clear about that. I didn't wake up one morning deciding to investigate my own sister. It was more like an itch under the skin, a wrongness, and my hands started moving toward it before my head had made any decision at all. I started with the post office. I put on my coat and I walked the 6 blocks to the branch on 5th, and I stood at the counter, and I asked the young man there about box 338. "My box," I said. "I'd like a key. I seem to have misplaced mine." He typed for a minute. Then he looked up with a polite, careful face. "Ma'am, I can order you a key, but I'll need the box holder to authorize it." "I am the box holder," I said. "Joyce Harmon." He turned the screen a little the way they do when they're trying to help you understand something without saying it outright. "The box is under 2 names," he said. "You're on it, but the authorized party who picks up the one who's been collecting the mail, that's the CO holder." He read the name off the screen. "Loretta Banks. That's my sister. She helps me." "Yes, ma'am. It's just you've never had a key issued to you. Not once since the box was opened, 19 years ago." He said it gently. "Every key on this account went to Ms. Banks." I thanked him. I walked back home. I don't remember the 6 blocks. 19 years. Every piece of mail with my name on it had gone into a box I could not open and been carried out by a hand that was not mine. That was Wednesday. On Sunday, Loretta would come the way she always came. But I couldn't wait until Sunday. I couldn't sit in that apartment with the itch for 4 more days, smiling at her over the greens and the cornbread while this thing ate a hole in me. I lay awake Wednesday night and I did something I had not done in 20 years. I stopped defending her in my own head. Every time my mind reached for the old comfort, she's your sister, she loves you, she's all you've got. I made myself set it down and just look at the plain facts. A box I couldn't open. A key I'd never held. A little girl's letters I was supposed to have refused. And a padded envelope once on Loretta's side table marked "Return to Sender" in a hand that looked almost but not quite like mine. By morning I wasn't itching anymore. I was cold and clear and afraid, and I knew I was going to go to my sister's house. Loretta had a standing appointment on Thursday afternoons, the pharmacy, then her hair. She'd been keeping it for years. I knew her spare key hung on a hook inside my own kitchen cabinet, the twin of the one she used on my door. I told myself I was only going to look. I told myself sisters don't have secrets. I told myself a lot of things, and then I called a taxi and I went to my sister's house while she was out. Her place was a little brick, 2-story over on Adams. I let myself in the side door. The house was quiet and smelled like that lavender lotion, the same lavender for 40 years. I don't know what pulled me up the stairs. I'd been in that house 1,000 times and never once gone up to the 2nd floor. But I went up and I opened the door to the spare room, the one she always called her storage room, and I turned on the light. There were boxes, cardboard boxes stacked along the far wall, some of them soft and sagging with age, some newer, the tape still shiny. I opened the nearest one because the flap was already loose, and I stopped breathing. On top, still wrapped in tissue, still with the tags on, was a cashmere shawl, soft as a cloud, $180. The one I had mailed to Renee for her 40th birthday 5 years ago and never heard a single word about. I had told myself she probably thought it was too old-fashioned. I had made up a whole little story about my daughter's ingratitude, and I had believed it, and here it was folded in tissue never touched. I lifted it out with both hands. Underneath was a box I knew. A good pen engraved DH, $220, Darius's promotion. I had wondered for years if he'd even liked it. He had never seen it. I dug down through that box like a woman clawing her way out of a grave. A silk scarf. A photo album I'd put together by hand, page by page, with pictures of him as a boy. Baby clothes, still folded, still smelling of the cedar block I'd packed them with. And at the very bottom, wedged in sideways, the frame of a child's bicycle taken apart for shipping the 2 wheels laid neatly beside it. $400. For a grandson I had never met. It had never left this room. Every gift I had sent into the silence for 20 years was in these boxes. Not thrown away, not given to goodwill. Kept, hidden 10 feet from where my sister laid her head every night. And mixed in among them were the padded envelopes, dozens of them, each one stamped in red "Return to Sender" in handwriting that curled and looped almost exactly like mine, but wasn't. Close. So close, just not mine. I sat down on the floor of that room. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. And then I saw the second stack of boxes, the ones behind the first. These were different. These were full of envelopes addressed to me. To Joyce Harmon at my old address, at my apartment, at every place I'd lived. Postmarked across 20 years. Some in a grown woman's careful hand. some in a man's blunt print, and some, a lot of them, in the enormous, hopeful crayon letters of children. Not one of them had been opened. Hundreds of letters, sent to me, by my children, by my grandchildren, caught in a box before they could ever reach my hands. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely work the flap of the first envelope. I opened the one on top. The paper was thin and soft from age. The handwriting was a child's big, round, careful, a little girl sounding out every word. Dear Grandma Joyce, Mommy says you don't write back, but I am going to keep trying anyway. I drew you our house. The dog is Biscuit. Do you like it? Love, Kayla. There was a drawing folded inside. A yellow house. A brown dog. 3 stick figure children, and off to one side, holding a stick figure, hand an old woman with gray hair and a big smile. She'd drawn me into her family. A grandmother she had never met standing in the yard holding her hand. I made a sound I didn't know I could make. I opened another. And another. My hands were moving on their own now. A letter from Renee, the paper warped like it had once been wet. Mama, whatever I did, please just tell me and I'll fix it. I'll do anything. Just don't disappear from me. I'm begging you. The date at the top was 15 years ago. A letter from Darius 3 states away in that blunt engineer's print. I don't understand what happened to us. I have a son now. His name is Jaden. He should know his grandmother. Please, Mama, just call. Another from Darius older, the paper stiffer. We're getting married in the spring. Michelle's a good woman, you'd love her. I know things are bad between us, but you're still my mother, and I want you in that church. Please come. I had found out about my son's wedding 4 months after it happened from a cousin in a grocery store. Loretta had told me it must have been one of those tiny courthouse things that he clearly hadn't wanted his family there. I had cried in the cereal aisle. He had wanted me in the church. A card, homemade 3 children's names signed at the bottom in 3 different sizes of handwriting. Happy Mother's Day to our grandma. We hope we get to meet you someday. Imani, Jaden, Kayla. A photograph tucked inside 3 children on a porch step squinting into the sun exactly the way Renee used to squint on that blanket at the lake. I had grandbabies who made me a Mother's Day card, and I had spent that same Mother's Day sitting alone at my window, deciding they'd forgotten I was alive. 15 years, 12 years, 20 years. Birthday after birthday. Every one of them reaching for me. Every one of them ending up in a box in a lavender-smelling room. And then at the bottom of the last stack, I found the ones that stopped my heart cold. A separate bundle, tied with string. And these were not letters to me. These were letters from me. Copies, carbon copies, the kind you make when you want a record of letters written in that curling hand that was almost mine. Signed Mama, signed Joyce. Sent over the years to Renee, to Darius. I read one. Do not contact me again. You made your choice when you left me alone. As far as I am concerned, I no longer have children. Do not write. Do not call. Do not come, Mama. I read it 3 times. I had never written those words. I had never seen those words. But my children had. My children had held that page in their hands in their own homes and read their mother telling them she was done with them forever. And it was signed in my name. Here is the whole of it. I'll say it plain the way it landed on me sitting on that floor. For 20 years, my sister had been writing to my children in my name, telling them their mother didn't want them, and writing to me in theirs, telling me the same. 2 people who loved each other on either side of one wall, and Loretta standing in the middle of it passing lies both directions. I did not cry. I want you to understand that. I sat on that floor surrounded by 20 years of stolen love, and I did not make a sound. Every birthday I'd spent alone. Every Christmas. Every night I lay awake asking God what I'd done to make my babies hate me. Every time I dialed a dead number and told myself they'd changed it to get away from me. Every gift I'd wrapped with these hands and sent into what I thought was silence. It was her. It had always only been her. There was just one thing I understood in that moment. One plain fact underneath all of it, and I'll give it to you the way it came to me. After Samuel died, when I could not get out of the bed, I had handed my sister my mail and my checkbook and my whole broken life, and I had never once asked for any of it back. She had made very sure I never would. I heard the side door. Joyce! Loretta's voice floated up the stairs, easy unbothered. She'd seen the taxi or my coat. Joyce, honey, what are you doing up there? You know I don't keep anything but junk in that. She stopped in the doorway. She took in the room, the open boxes, the letters spread across the floor around me like fallen leaves. the bundle of carbon copies in my hand, and I watched my sister's face do something I had never seen it do in 58 years. I watched it go still, calculating, a stranger's face wearing my sister's skin. "Now, Joyce," she said carefully, "before you go getting yourself worked up. Whose handwriting is this, Loretta? Baby, you're confused. You've been under a lot of... Whose handwriting is this?" I held up the letter signed in my name. My voice did not shake. That surprised me. It came out low and level and cold as lake water in January. Because it isn't mine. But my children think it is, don't they? For a moment she tried to hold the mask up. I saw her reach for the next lie. And then maybe because she saw my face, maybe because 20 years of being believed had made her lazy, she let it drop. She let it drop, and what was underneath was worse than anything I could have imagined. She lifted her chin. "I did it for you." "You did what for me?" "I protected you." She stepped into the room, and now the words came fast, like she'd been waiting years to say them. "You didn't see them after the funeral, Joyce. You were too far gone. But I did. Renee moving to that big house, too busy for you. Darius running off across the country. They were going to break your heart slow over years, a missed call here, a forgotten birthday there, and I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand to watch them do that to you. Drop by drop." Her eyes were wet now, and God help me, the tears looked real. "So I made it clean. I made it quick. I gave you one clean break instead of 1,000 little cuts. You gave me 20 years alone. I gave you me." And there it was. Her voice cracked open, and what poured out was the truth, the real truth, the thing at the bottom of the box. "You never needed me, Joyce. Not once in our whole lives. You were the pretty one, the good one, the one Mama bragged on. You got Samuel. You got the house, the children, the perfect little family, and I got to stand off to the side and clap. My whole life." She was crying openly now. "And then he died, and for the first time you needed somebody. You needed me. And I wasn't about to let those two take that away." There it was. Not a monster. A woman who had spent her whole life hungry and had finally found a way to be fed. That was almost the worst part. I could see her. I could see the little sister standing off to the side, clapping. But I want to tell you what I felt standing up off that floor with my knees screaming and my sister crying in front of me. I did not feel one thing for her. I had felt everything for her for 20 years. I had loved her, leaned on her, thanked God for her over cold coffee 1,000 Sunday mornings. And it was all built on this. Every kind word she'd ever said to me had been the hand that held me down, while the other hand robbed me. I did not scream. I want you to know that. I didn't throw anything. I gathered up those letters, my children's letters, into my arms, as many as I could hold, and I stood in front of my sister, and when I spoke quietly. You didn't protect me from my children, Loretta," I said. "You stole them. You stole 20 birthdays. You stole a wedding I never knew about and a grandson's whole childhood. You stole 3 babies I will never get back the years of." I held her eyes. "And you're going to give me every single thing you have left, because I am going to spend whatever time I've got taking it all back." Something changed in her face then. The tears stopped like a faucet, and I saw the fear come up underneath. Not fear of hurting me, but fear of losing what she'd built. "Joyce," she said, and her voice went soft and pleading, the Sunday morning voice, the coffee voice. "Joyce, don't do anything hasty. Think about it. Who's going to look after you now, if not me? You're 63 years old. You put me in this, and you'll be all alone. Is that what you want, to be an old woman with nobody?" 20 years that voice had worked on me. 20 years you'll be all alone had been the most frightening thing in the world because she was the one who'd made sure it was true. I looked at her, and for the first time it didn't frighten me at all. "I already was alone, Loretta," I said. "You just made sure I didn't know it." I walked past her down the stairs out the side door into the gray October afternoon with my arms full of 20 years. And here is where the last piece dropped into place, because as I sat in the taxi holding those letters, one thought pushed all the others aside. The mail, the checkbook. My whole broken life handed over 19 years ago and never asked back. If she'd controlled the letters that long, what else had she controlled? I went straight to the bank the next morning the moment the doors opened. It didn't take them 10 minutes to find it. A power of attorney signed by me in a shaking hand in the worst month of my life. I barely remembered signing it. I barely remembered that whole year giving my sister the right to manage my affairs. Every affair. All of them. The family house on Carolina Street, The house where I raised Renee and Darius, where I planted the rose bushes by the porch, where Samuel fixed that screen door the very week he died, sold 19 years ago. I had known it was sold. Loretta had handled it when I couldn't handle anything, and I'd been grateful. What I had never known was the number, $214,000. I'd always assumed most of it went to Samuel's debts and my care, that there was a little left somewhere Loretta was minding for me. That's what she always said. "I'm minding it for you, Joyce, for a rainy day." The young woman at the bank turned her monitor so I could see. She was careful with her voice, the way people get careful when they're about to hand you something heavy and they know it's going to land on your foot. 20 years of withdrawals. Not all at once that would have been noticed even by a broken woman. A little here, a little there. Steady as a dripping faucet in a room where nobody's listening. Month after month, year after year, moving out of the account with my name on it and into one that had hers. The newer car in the driveway. The cruise to the Bahamas with the church group. The lavender lotion and the good hair appointments and the little carved turtle she brought me back and set on my shelf, the turtle I had dusted faithfully every single week and thanked her for. All of it, mine. Bought with the house where my husband died. I sat in that bank chair for a long moment, and I finally understood the shape of the whole thing. The whole time I believed my children had abandoned their mother to get at what she had. The whole time my sister whispered, "They only want your money. Watch your purse." There had been exactly one person on this earth reaching into my pockets. She had been pouring my coffee with the same hand. I didn't call first. After 20 years, what would I even have said into a phone? I loaded the boxes into a taxi. My children's letters, all of them every stolen word, and I gave the driver the address off that cream-colored invitation, and I rode out to the suburbs with my whole life in cardboard on the seat beside me. Renee answered the door herself. When she saw me standing there, her face went through everything at once. Shock then, that old careful hope. Then the fear that I'd come to say something cruel. She'd been braced for cruelty from her mother for 20 years. That's what broke my heart worst of all in that first second. My daughter flinched just a little, waiting to be hurt. I couldn't speak, so I just held up the letters, a fistful of them, her handwriting and Darius's and 3 children's. "I got them," I said. My voice came apart. "Baby, I got them. Every single one. I never saw them. Not one. Not until yesterday." She looked at the letters in my hand, at her own handwriting 15 years old. And I watched the truth hit her the same way it had hit me on that floor all at once and from underneath. "You never—" She put her hand over her mouth. "Mama, we thought you—" And then we were both on that porch, holding on to each other, crying the kind of crying that has 20 years stored up behind it. When we could finally talk, we sat at her kitchen table, a table in a house I'd never been inside, and we laid it out between us piece by piece, and it was worse than either of us had carried alone, because we hadn't just each been hurt. We'd each been told a story about the other, and we'd believed it. "We wrote you every month for years," Renee said. "Birthday cards, pictures when the babies were born. Then the letters started coming back returned to sender. And then one came from you." She got up, went to a drawer in her own kitchen, and took out a page soft and worn from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. She slid it across the table. I knew before I read it. It was that handwriting. Almost mine. Signed, Mama. "Do not write me again. You made your choice. As far as I'm concerned, I have no children." "I read that when I was 30, Renee said quietly. "I kept it because I couldn't throw away the last thing my mother ever said to me. Here is the thing I need you to understand, the thing I know some of you are already asking. How? How does this go on for 20 years? Why didn't they just come? Why didn't they knock the door down?" Renee answered it for me, and I'll give it to you the way she gave it to me. "We came, Mama," she said. Once. Darius flew in and we drove out to the old house together, both of us, to make you face us. And Aunt Loretta was there. She met us on the porch. She said you'd had a breakdown after Daddy died, that you were fragile, that you couldn't take the stress, that seeing us would kill you, that the doctors had said so. And then she reminded us of the letter. Renee's jaw tightened. How do you force your way into a woman's house when she has written to you in her own hand more than once, telling you she never wants to see you again? You don't. You tell yourself you're respecting her wishes, and you go home and you feel like the worst child who ever lived, and you stop. She looked at me. "She built a wall out of our own guilt, Mama. And we helped her build it because we thought it was what you wanted. There it was. Nobody had failed to find me. They had been standing at the wall the whole time, believing I was the one who built it. We sat at that table until the light went gold in the windows, and we did the hard, holy work of counting up what was stolen. Renee's wedding, she'd worn our mother's pearls, she told me, because she couldn't have me there, and it was the closest thing to having me. The day Imani was born, she'd sent me a photograph of that baby with a note that said, "Come meet your granddaughter, please. It's not too late." I never saw it. It went into a box. The day Jaden came. The day Kayla came. Every first step and first day of school and lost tooth, all of them announced to a mother who never got the announcement. I looked at the wall of Renee's kitchen covered in photographs of a family I had grieved as if they were dead, and I realized they had grieved me the very same way. We had held 2 funerals for each other 20 years long for people who were alive the entire time. Then Renee wiped her face and got up and went to the bottom of the stairs and called up her voice, trembling. "Imani, Jaden, come down here. There's somebody I need you to meet." I heard footsteps, and 2 children, one nearly a young woman, now 16, and a boy of 12 with his uncle's serious eyes, came down the stairs and stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at me the way you stare at someone you've only seen in old photographs. "This is your grandmother," Renee said. "This is my mama, and everything you were ever told about why she wasn't here, none of it was true. She wanted us the whole time. Somebody kept her from us." Imani was the first to move. She crossed the kitchen slowly, this girl I'd last known as a face in a stolen photograph, and she looked at me for a long moment, and then she said in the smallest voice, "We wondered about you our whole lives," and she put her arms around my neck. Jaden hung back the way boys do when they're afraid of crying in front of people, but after a minute he came and stood close enough that I could reach out and rest my hand on his shoulder, and he let me. He had his grandfather's shoulders. He had Samuel's shoulders. I hadn't been able to say that about a living soul in 20 years. I met 3 of my grandchildren that week for the first time in my life. I was 63 years old, and I was starting from the very beginning, and I would have crawled the whole way on my hands and knees to get there. 2 days later, Darius came, my son. 41 years old now, tall like his father, that same blunt honesty in his face. He walked into Renee's living room, and he stopped when he saw me, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he crossed the room and he put his arms around me, and this big grown man shook like the 12-year-old who used to climb into my lap for one more chapter. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet and his jaw was working the way it did when he was a boy, trying not to cry, and what came out of him wasn't relief. It was the thing he'd been carrying. "I should have knocked the door down," he said. "That day at the old house, I stood on that porch and I let Aunt Loretta turn me around, and I got in the car and I drove to the airport, and I told myself I was doing the right thing. Respecting your wishes." His voice cracked all the way through. "You were right there, Mama. On the other side of a wall I helped build. And I left." What kind of son leaves? I took my boy's face in my hands the way I used to when he was small, and the world had been too hard on him. "You listen to me," I said. "A man came to your mother's door and told you the doctors said your face would kill her. He showed you a letter in her own writing telling you to stay away. You didn't leave because you stopped loving me, Darius. You left because you loved me enough to give me what you thought I was asking for." I made him look at me. "She used your love against you. That's the cruelest part of the whole thing. She didn't turn you into a bad son. She took a good one and made him a weapon against himself. Don't you dare carry that. That weight is hers. It was never yours." He broke down then, and I held him, and I let my own tears fall into his hair, and for the first time in 20 years I got to be his mother again. Not a photograph on a wall, not a cruel letter in a drawer, but his living mother holding him while he cried. It was Darius who solved the last little mystery, the one I'd forgotten to even wonder about. "Mama," he said, "how have you been managing for money?" I told him about the strange insurance policy. The good coverage that had appeared years ago, already paid up in my name, that I could never explain. The clerical blessing I'd decided to stop questioning. My son looked down at his hands. "That was me," he said. "I set it up 8 years ago. I called every insurance company in Gary until I found one that would let me pay a supplemental policy directly in your name straight to them. I couldn't send money to you. I figured you'd send it back, or Aunt Loretta would say you didn't want it. But I could make sure that if you got sick, you'd be covered. I couldn't stop being your son, Mama, even when I thought you hated me. I couldn't let you be out there with nothing." 8 years. My boy had been quietly protecting me for 8 years from 3 states away, believing the whole time that I had cast him out. The love had never stopped. Not on their side. Not for one single day. It had just been locked in a box. Now I want to tell you what I did next because some of you are waiting to hear it, and you deserve to hear that I did not let it go. I found a lawyer. Her name was Sandra Whitfield, and she took one look at those carbon copies and those bank statements, and she got very quiet and very focused. I met a woman from Adult Protective Services, Angela Boyd, who had seen this exact thing more times than she wanted to count. What Loretta had done had a name, several names: financial exploitation of an elder, forgery, theft. This was not some family disagreement you settle over coffee. This was a crime, and it had a paper trail 19 years long. I pressed charges, every one of them. I did not hesitate, and I did not lose sleep. They brought Loretta in, and she tried the only thing she'd ever known how to do. She cried. She told them she'd been caring for her poor, fragile sister for 20 years, sacrificing her own life, and now that same sister was turning on her out of confusion, out of dementia, put up to it by greedy children who'd never wanted anything but the money. But this time there was no room she could work. This time there were the letters in her hand. There was a handwriting expert who laid my real signature next to her forgeries and pointed out one by one the little places where she got me wrong, the way I looped my J the way she never quite could. There were the bank records, every drip of that faucet running for 20 years into her account, and out through her driveway and her cruise and her lavender lotion. Word got around the way it does in a place like Gary. People from the old church people who'd known us both since we were girls in matching dresses our mother sewed could not make sense of it. Loretta had spent 20 years being praised as the good sister, the devoted one, the one who never abandoned poor Joyce like those ungrateful children did. She had built her whole reputation on the lie. And now the lie came apart in public in a courtroom in the newspaper, and there was nowhere left for her to be the martyr. Nobody believed her. For the first time in her life, my little sister stood in a room and told her story, and watched every face in it turn away. I was there the day she was arraigned. She found me in the hallway afterward, and she still had the nerve to reach for my hands. "Joyce," she whispered. "Sister, you're really going to put me away after everything I did for you?" I looked at her a long moment. I thought about the coffee. 20 years of Sunday coffee poured by the hand that robbed me. "You spent 20 years, I said, making sure I had no one in this world but you." I took my hands back. "Now you're going to find out exactly what that feels like." And I walked out of that courthouse into the light, and I did not look back. She pleaded, and then she was tried, and then she was convicted of forgery, of theft, of the financial exploitation of an elder, which is what the law calls it, when someone spends 20 years draining a widow dry. She'll pay restitution she can't afford for the rest of her life, and she'll pay it from inside. Not all the money came back. A good deal of it was gone into 20 years of a life she stole to live the cruises and the cars and the comfort. But I'll tell you what did come back, and it was worth more than the house on Carolina Street ever sold for. In the weeks after I didn't rush it. You don't pour 20 years back into a cup all at once. Renee came by my apartment on Sundays. Now my Sundays belonged to me again, and sometimes she brought the children, and slowly, carefully, we learned each other. I learned that Amani wanted to be a nurse. I learned that Jaden was quiet like his grandfather, and could take a bicycle apart and put it back together. And I finally gave him the $400 bicycle from the box 19 years late, and watched him ride it up and down the block. We didn't try to make up for 20 years. We just started the 21st. 4 months later, my family threw me a birthday party, not a mansion. Renee's kitchen and Darius flew in with Michelle and Jaden, and there were balloons that Amani had blown up herself, and a cake that leaned a little to one side because the children had frosted it. For the first time in 20 years, I sat in the middle of my own family, and there were more voices in the room than I could keep track of, and every one of them was mine. And in the middle of it, that little girl Kayla, 9 years old, gap-toothed my own eyes, looking back at me, took my hand and tugged me away from the table. "Come on, Grandma," she said. "I have to show you something. It's a secret." She led me down the hall to her room and dropped to her knees and pulled a shoebox out from under her bed. An old shoebox, the corners soft held shut with a rubber band. She held it in her lap and she looked up at me, suddenly shy. "I have to tell you something, and don't be mad," she said. "For a long time, Mommy told me you didn't want my letters. She said you didn't write back because you didn't want to be our grandma." She dropped her eyes. "But I didn't believe her, because in the pictures on Mommy's wall you were holding her when she was a baby, and you looked like you loved her a whole lot. So I decided you must be lost, and I kept making you things anyway, in case you ever came." She took the rubber band off the box. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, years of them. A drawing for every birthday and every Christmas and every ordinary Tuesday when a little girl thought of a grandmother she had never met. The yellow house, the brown dog, and in every single one off to the side holding a small stick figure and an old woman with gray hair and a big, big smile. I made you one every year, Kayla said, even when everybody said you didn't want them. I saved them all, because I knew. She looked up at me, absolutely certain. I knew you'd come. I got down on the floor of that little girl's bedroom in my good church dress, and I gathered that baby into my arms, and I wept into her twists with their little beaded ends, because she had believed in me across 20 years of being told not to. This child I had never met had kept a grandmother's place set at the table of her heart and refused to let anyone clear it. And then sitting there on Kayla's floor, holding all those drawings, I finally understood how it had all come undone. How after 20 years that were built to last forever, the wall had finally cracked. It was her, this baby. It was Kayla all along. Because a year before that party, the family had gone to visit their Aunt Loretta. She was still to them the only living thread back toward me, and Kayla being 9, and Curious had wandered upstairs into a room she wasn't supposed to enter. And she'd seen the boxes. She'd seen envelopes addressed to Joyce Harmon at an address that wasn't the old house. She'd seen her own drawings, the ones she'd been told I didn't want saved and stacked in a stranger's spare room. She hadn't understood it, but she'd been smart enough and stubborn enough to take a picture of that address with her mother's phone. And she'd gone to Renee and said the words that started everything. Grandma does want us. I saw our letters at Aunt Loretta's. She kept them. Renee hadn't known what to believe, but she'd taken that address, and she'd found out that her mother was alive and living just across town all this time. And after 20 years of believing I had written her off, she had been too frightened to send a letter that could be rejected. So she'd sent the only thing she could hide behind. A cold, formal printed invitation. A test. A door left open just a crack to see if I would walk through it. And that invitation had gone straight to my apartment mailbox, the one box in the world my sister didn't control and slipped past her for the first time in 20 years. Which is why Loretta had panicked. Why she'd insisted on coming to that party. Why she'd hurried me out the door the second a 9-year-old opened her mouth about letters. Not a lawyer, not a detective, not the police, not the bank, not me. A 9-year-old with a shoebox and a stubborn heart had reached into 20 years of grown-up lies and pulled the whole thing down. I live near my children now. A small apartment, but it has a window that looks out over Lake Michigan, and on clear mornings I can see all the way out to where the water meets the sky. I still make my coffee and carry it to the window. But now, most mornings, there's a phone buzzing on the table with a text from Renee, or a photo from Darius, or a drawing that Kayla wants me to see. I won't sit here and tell you it all healed clean, because that would be its own kind of lie, and I'm done with lies. 20 years are gone. I will never hold my grandbabies as babies. That was taken and it doesn't come back. There are birthdays and a wedding and a whole first decade of 3 little lives that live now, only in a box of letters I read when I'm strong enough. Some of the money is just gone. And Loretta is my sister, and there are nights, God help me, when I grieve her too, the sister I thought I had. But I chose the real thing over the pretty lie. I chose my children late and broken and true over a comfortable story told to me by the person who was stealing my life. If I could reach through this screen and tell you one thing, mothers, grandmothers, women who have been made to feel like a burden by the people who owe you everything, it would be this. Be careful who you let hold your story. Be careful who you let stand between you and the people you love, telling you what those people think, telling you what they feel telling you, they've forgotten you. Sometimes the one whispering nobody wants you but me is the one making sure it's true. My children never forgot me. Someone made very sure I forgot them first. And a 9-year-old with a shoebox brought us all the way back home.